Welcome to Occupy Pro Wrestling. I'm Chris, that's Alex, and after last night's Raw, Uncle Howdy and the Wyatt Sicks have debuted. Where do we go from here? Alex, roll the intro. All right, we had a big moment last night on Raw. It's been a few months coming, potentially a few years, depending on how you want to have this perspective. But Uncle Howdy finally made his return to WWE in a really awesome, I would say awesome, gruesome segment as well last night on Raw.
Mm-hmm.
Uncle Howdy, as well as a whole cast of characters. They've been teasing this months with like these QR codes on the shows, on Twitch. They're in the video game 2K24. It's been a big deal, and everyone's talking about it. And so we here at Occupy Pro Wrestling are also talking about it.
Yep. So they put out so Fightful Select put out a report after last night's Raw. Um, Obviously we have the inspirations on the characters being past characters from the Bray Wyatt lore, so to speak. Sister Abigail, Ramblin' Rabbit, Mercy the Buzzard, Husky Pig in particular. Um, it was noted that the debut was meticulously planned, and I really got a sense of that from the way that they handled the debut on Raw.
Right.
Yeah. So the big thing about this, though, the big thing about it is that they were being noted. Sorry, Fightful did note that no supernatural elements are to be expected of it, which is kind of it's important to kind of keep a note of that because of how supernatural gimmicks have been received in the past. The stable wasn't listed in rundowns, but the roster was aware just enough to like be prepared for their responses, as we saw like with Jey Uso on the digital exclusive after Raw. Very notably saying he did not want anything to do. Like he realized like he didn't want to mess with these guys, which was kind of cool. Like so, but WWE was said to be pleased with the execution and the camera work, as well as the high satisfaction with they were also highly satisfied with the crowd's reaction and further feedback on the segment. So, yeah, there was
Yeah.
that closing segment was a lot to take in, but
There was a lot to take in. A lot alike. I know that in the reports and some other reporting that WWE is not naming these characters other than we know Uncle Howdy has been on the past.
Mm-hmm.
We know because of reporting and stuff that the characters are most likely Nikki Cross, who was obviously playing the Sister Abigail thing at
Mm-hmm.
the beginning of the thing. And then there's Eric Rowan, who was obviously the rabbit.
Mm-hmm.
um, I couldn't tell because of how dark it was which person was Joe Gacy and which person was Dexter Loomis of the other two
So
characters.
yes, so I had to
You could tell.
closer. Yeah, partly a tattoo thing, partly an eye thing. But it has been noted that Dexter Loomis is portraying the Mercy the Buzzard like character, and Joe Gacy is handling the Huskus Pig, the gas mask
Yeah,
character.
probably.
So very likely. So
Actually, I think it looks like Coach Gacy's lost a little weight though for this
yeah,
role.
I will say
Actually, but that
yeah.
aside, like we knew who they were going into this.
Mm-hmm.
This is something that we have been teased for months. I mentioned the QR codes, the Twitch, the video game
Mm-hmm.
kind of cameos. But it's also something that's kind of been exhaustingly teased for months. Like we knew for a while, like Eric Rowan had re-signed with WWE. He was doing
Mm-hmm.
independent shows and he had to pull all of his appearances because he signed a new contract. We know that Joe Casey was written off of NXT a couple months back.
Yeah.
Nikki Cross has been written off of WWE for some time. Dexter Loomis came back briefly when he was rehired, and
Yeah.
was on Raw and kind of involved with Johnny Gargano, and then he disappeared,
Mm-hmm.
and no trace of him. So we were generally aware
Yeah.
of who these people were, and so the question I asked at the top, and the question we kind of want to stop is where they go from here, because we've seen this before.
Yeah.
And what I mean by this is we've seen this game changing like faction come in the end of a show and do something crazy. Probably one of our most famous examples in WWE is the Nexus.
Mm-hmm.
Come in at the end of the show, they come out, they beat up everyone in the ring, they pull the ring apart, they destroy the set, like that kind of thing. And that's pretty legendary. We knew who those characters were because of the old NXT show, the competition show, but
Right.
it was something different, right?
Right.
And then we have a more recent example of this kind of thing with Retribution. Shout outs to Retribution. They didn't last as long as Occupy Pro Wrestling, but they did last very long in our hearts. But Retribution, like coming onto the show and like blowing up Transformers and stuff and disrupting the show,
Mm-hmm.
we saw how that was executed as well. And so we've seen kind of like the best of how these game changing factions introductions can be done, and we've also seen how the worst can be done.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Uh,
And so what I propose and what I want to see, and I want to ask you maybe what you want to see next week going forward is like, what do we want to see to make this not like Retribution? I think that's kind of like my floor here is don't be Retribution. The things I had a problem with Retribution were that, Retribution apparently was disrupting the show, but no one really cared. Like none of the characters cared, none of the people cared. Um, it was kind of treated as a joke, and then we all know how Retribution ended up.
and and
Uh,
and they got presented with contracts and drafted. Let's
yeah,
not
that
forget
was
that.
that was that was so bad. Like Retribution made a statement about their cast offs from WWE, and WWE is so scared they had to sign them to contracts. Like if they do that with the Wyatt Six, uh, we have to sign Uncle Howdy to a contract because he might kill us.
It's the only way to
Like
keep him in check.
it's the only way to
Uh,
keep him in check is to give him a paycheck, right? But in all seriousness, like
yeah.
that's probably the thing I'm afraid of the most. And I think there's easy ways to like mitigate this fear. And so here's one idea I want to pitch to the audience. Is that next week on Raw, I don't want it to be business as usual. And we've seen this so many times with factions, like even when the Judgment Day like does stuff, like the next week, like no one when no one cares, right? I want next week, I want wall to wall security guards all over the show. I want security guards guarding Michael Cole and Pat McAfee. I want to
Yep.
see Gorilla locked down. I want them to show us that, hey, we have 20 security guards here. They're not getting to Gorilla again. Every time there's a backstage segment, a backstage vignette, I want to see security lurking in the background. When Liv Morgan is trying to seduce Dom Mysterio, I want two guys with the blankets and the little
Mm-hmm.
earpiece like in the background watching them because you know the Uncle Howdy is a psychotic killer. Like Chad Gable's dead, right? You saw Wikipedia, he's dead. Um, but no, but seriously, like they
yeah.
had blood on the walls. Like they were acting like these people were dead, or if not dead, definitely injured, near out, and stuff like that.
Right.
Like that's a serious threat in the universe, right? And if we're supposed to
Has to
believe
be.
that these people are psychos, that we can't control them, I need WWE to react appropriately. I don't want Monday to roll around and we have Jey Uso in the ring talking about his title shot against Sami Zayn later tonight as like nothing happened or whatever. And I don't know that Jey Uso and Sami Zayn are having a match next week. That's just something
Right.
I'm thinking. But that's the type of thing WWE would do, right? Like, or Sami Zayn comes out and talks about his next challenger for the Intercontinental title as though nothing crazy is happening backstage, as though everything like I want extra security in the crowds. Like we have to protect the fans. Like that would be pretty cool, right? Like having at
Absolutely.
ringside.
Yeah.
Yeah.
To add slightly to that, because I think to me it kind of circles back around to the teases and all the QR codes and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Very rarely did you have like people responding to it on the programming, just because it was meant to be almost subliminal in a way, like in the way that
Right.
especially on the television programs. Like I think the biggest, most notable reaction to any of them was the one that like kind of opened up Raw Talk, because the hosts of Raw Talk were so like taken aback by what just happened. And I bring this up just because like now that the Wyatt group is here, they have, to your point, they have to address it, and the best
Yeah.
way, and that's why, like, yeah. So having security shows that they're addressing it, because it's not like they can pretend that nothing happened, and I think they were really smart in like how they had again kind of going back to their post Raw digital exclusive and like other social media stuff. They were very smart in how they handled that. Like they didn't no sell it basically. They're like now that it's happened, they are selling it in the way that you would basically expect certain people to sell it.
The nice thing about what they did on Monday was that we saw a prominent character on Raw as part of the segment, right? Chad Gable was assassinated. Rest in peace, Chad Gable. But he's like been a major character on Raw for since before WrestleMania
Hmm.
in the Intercontinental title scene,
Yeah.
and he just made a heel turn. And the Alpha Academy just broke up, and now he got shot backstage. I know I keep using these words. It literally looks
Shot,
like a gunshot
attacked,
wound.
whatever you want to use,
It
short of that one
yeah, it
word.
looks like a gunshot wound. I don't know. He's
Hmm.
got like the thing up in their temple, but even if he's just been knocked out, like I think there's story implications, right? Because he's
Hmm.
involved with Sami Zayn. Does Otis now feel guilty for walking out on Chad Gable because
Right.
Chad Gable, wasn't protected? Otis could have protected Chad Gable here, right?
Right. Right.
Does Otis and the rest of the Alpha Academy now feel guilty about this? Does Sami Zayn feel guilty about this because he pushed Gable away or whatever? I would like to see some sort of addressing with that as well. And there's
Absolutely.
another point that I wanted you to touch on is, the reporting suggests that unlike the Fiend, they won't lean into the supernatural.
Yeah. So yeah, another idea I think is good to that it's good to look at with this is to really lean into what I could best describe as less spooky, more terror. Because the thing about the fiend was that so for context here, I'm a big horror fan. I'm into that stuff, but I know that it ain't everybody's cup of tea. And the stuff with the fiend in I would say both of the runs, there was definitely some ups and downs. And I also think it kind of comes down to what happens as some people who as some detractors of all this have kind of said, it still comes down to what happens once that bell rings, once these guys actually get into the ring.
Hmm.
And that's why I think like leaning less into the supernatural and more into the idea that these guys, this group is terrifying in their own way. I think we were discussing a little bit like less old OG Undertaker stuff and more like Texas Chainsaw Massacre in terms of like these guys are brutal. These guys are brutal and these guys are violent. If they play into that and the spooky stuff is just more the lore to kind of build these guys up, I think it's going to work out because that also accentuates the kind of the strengths of each of the individual players because
Right.
you look at everybody involved, you realize, you've got Eric Rowan, you've got Joe Gacy, you've got Dexter Loomis, you got these main players, you even got, you got Bo Dallas. And it's like you have to look at like what their actual in-ring stuff is going to be like, and their in-ring styles got to reflect the lore and like the actual gimmicks going on, but they got to, and leaning more into them just being kind of being them going after people from the jump, from the opening bell, being, brutalizing them, so to speak, for lack of a better way to put it. I think that's going to be the key
Yeah.
to like understanding like how, from an in-ring perspective, these guys are actually going to work instead of just all this stuff. Because again, I love the presentation outside the ring. Obviously, the in-ring stuff needs to be addressed, but leaning into them more as being brutal, you know, killers or whatever term you want to use for it within the realm
Right.
of WWE. These guys are brutal. These guys are violent, and if that's reflected in their in-ring style, then that's going to be how that part of it works. Because that's, I think, like with anything else to do with this angle, it's all in the follow-up,
Right.
and the biggest follow-up is what happens when they actually get into matches.
Yeah, I think it'll be some time before we see him in matches, and I like that you're invoking like horror movies, like the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Like,
Mm-hmm.
my biggest fear is not grounding their terror in reality, and with like the movie the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, that is seemingly grounded in reality.
Right.
Someone's going to get in the comments and tell me that actually I missed the whole mystical side of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. I'm not a horror fan, so you can at me in the comments. It's fine. But yeah, to that point, like one of the biggest problems with the Fiend was the fact that he was like so indestructible in the ring, and it like didn't make sense with the rest of wrestling. I don't need these guys to be indestructible in the ring. I don't mind if they take some bumps. I don't mind. I don't even necessarily mind if they get to a point where they lose matches, like if the baby faces overcome them.
Hmm.
Um, you know, because I think you can translate horror and terror in different ways than I just hit you with the tombstone pile driver and you stood right back up because you're immortal or whatever,
Right.
or like what was happening. Like people are Seth Rollins, remember, 15 curb stomps to the Fiend.
Oh god, don't get me
Like,
started on that feud.
right. I don't want to ever see,
It's like,
Husky the pig kicking out of a curb stomp.
yeah.
I don't care. Like, you know, let him be brutal by attacking before the bell. Gouging at the eyes, making like having a nice big brawling style. I think is the type of wrestling that'll work really well for this group. Being crazy. We've seen Nikki Cross in like a crazy brawling gimmick before,
Mm-hmm.
which I think is helpful for the team to look at. Just things of that nature, I think will help improve the group.
Yeah. And I
But
think
yeah, I think that's where we have to leave it. Right? Is we have Raw next week. The follow up's going to be key. Like
mm-hmm.
they can do these brutal attacks for only so long. But bottom line, if WWE doesn't respond to it, like if the people in the universe doesn't respond to it, I'm gonna check out as a fan. And
Yeah.
I thought Raw was pretty brilliant last night, top to bottom. Not even just this, but with the Gable stuff, the Dom and Liv stuff, the Damian Priest stuff, the Drew stuff, the Ludwig Kaiser stuff, top to bottom, it was a fantastic show.
Mm-hmm.
So they have a lot to like live up to, and I hope they can do it. Like I'm a wrestling fan, you're a wrestling fan. This is Occupy Pro Wrestling. We want pro wrestling to be great all the time. That's what we want. All right, then. Thank you all for watching. You can check us out on all the socials at Power, the number two, the Smarks. This is Occupy Pro Wrestling. You can check us out on OccupyProWrestling.com as well. Get our merch, Occupy Pro Wrestling merch, see our blog, stuff like that. With that said, I am Chris. That's Alex. Alex, go ahead and play us out.